bow to you and invite you to bring Buddha nature to the forefront of your awareness. Enlightenment is here now. It's always been that way. But we live in very interesting times. It feels very, very heavy in some parts of the world at some times. Yet, there's this wave of enlightenment, of awakening that's happening throughout the world. All cultures, many different paths, where people are becoming aware of their own Buddha nature, of their awakening. And it's beautiful. But at the same time, we're on a very crowded planet of over 8 billion people. And many of them are still sound asleep, are still caught in suffering, in struggle, in domination. So it's easy to look at the world and only see that, only see the suffering, only see the trials and tribulations that we have yet to go through as a society, as individuals. It can all feel very, very depressing. But the good news, like I said, is this wave of enlightenment, this reawakening, has been taking place for a little bit, but it's getting bigger, it's getting stronger. There's more and more people who are going through this awakening process. And I'll be honest with you, the awakening process isn't always, just bliss and, ecstasy. That's there, of course. But there's also this intense questioning, this intense confusion as all of the structures of the self completely dissolve. But yet there's this ocean of joy that becomes the new reference point, the new view of the world. And we start to recognize that all of these 8 billion people who are all flailing about are really just in the kiddie pool. And if they just put their feet down, they could stand up and be like, oh, I'm not drowning. I just thought I was. So there's a lot of humor that happens as we see the suffering. But I want to talk about this wave of enlightenment that's happening because I see it in our lineage, that more and more people are awakening. I see it in other lineages, that there is this awakening happening. And because of the internet and YouTube and Facebook and websites, it's being talked about more. In even just a couple hundred years ago, to find enlightened teachings, you'd have to strap on your backpack and book passage and travel to the east and climb mountains and hopefully not be eaten by a tiger and have a very rough experience of it, of trying to find somebody willing to teach you. You probably have to learn a different language. In Western culture, there were awakened people as well, but they were much more quiet because of the power of the different churches, the different governments. so it was very, very difficult. It was a whole different attitude. Like even St. Francis, when he would go into samadhi and just dissolve and be completely engulfed by light, when he meditated, he would get up in the middle of the night and sneak out into the woods to have those experiences that he called the consolation of Christ, because people wouldn't understand. They would be confused by seeing this effulgent light coming from him, and he knew it wouldn't be accepted. So instead he did his work quietly and just continued to point people towards their own divinity, their own Buddha nature, as it should be, because it's not about a teacher. You know, we have this, I think because in the West we have this model of Christ, and it's been put up on the pedestal, and we separate ourselves from God. So when we become introduced to Buddhism, we do the same thing, right? We put the guy up on the pedestal, sometimes the woman, and we use that pedestal as a way to protect our ego, really. Because we say, oh, I could never be that. But the truth is, you are that. That is what you are. So we practice, we meditate, we practice mindfulness, we practice contemplation, and through these methods, we start to break down all these structures, all these conditioning that has been programmed into us that causes us to believe that we are someone. And so this wave of enlightenment that is here now is making it easier for people to recognize their own Buddha nature. Because we're starting to see people that seem quite ordinary, and if you spend some time with them, you realize that, oh wait, they're actually happy. they're in this ocean of joy. They're not flailing about, drowning in suffering. Maybe I can have that too. So that's the very good news, is that yes, you too have Buddha nature, and it's here now. It does require some work on your part. There is this gift of grace that comes through this ever-growing wave, but you have free will, and the way that I define free will is very simple. It's a choice to either go towards light or away from it, and that's it. That's your only choice. We pile on all these other choices to make it seem like we have more. Like, should I have coffee or tea? But if we strip away all the layers, one of those choices has more light, has more brightness to it. And when we choose that, then we are going towards light. And when we choose the other, it takes us away from light, and it feels heavier, it feels darker, there's more of a burdensome feeling. So we can actually, in our very mundane, ordinary, moment-to-moment existence, catch this wave of enlightenment simply by being aware of these minute choices that we make every day. And it begins, as always, on this particular path with meditation. We sit and we let go of everything. We use our mind, we train our mind to focus into that single point. And then we step through that gateless gate. And then the magic happens. The light just dissolves everything that we think we are. But when we rise up from the cushion, the meditation doesn't stop. We have to keep paying attention. We keep paying attention, we keep focusing. And once we are accustomed to actually paying attention to our mind as it moves, that's when we can start to add in this quality of free will and choice. And ask ourselves, is this bringing me towards light or away from light? And it's not always logical. Well, we have this addiction to logic, I think, that gets programmed into us because we want a lot of support for our choices. So we talk to all our friends, our family, and we get a whole bunch of social support. We go on Facebook. What should I do? But we know if you are able to do your meditation practice, you'll get better at doing this mindfulness practice. They work together. Well, for a little while there were people trying to teach mindfulness without meditation. And I have such compassion for those people that were attempting to be trained that way. Because from my perspective, trying to do mindfulness without meditation is torture. Because there's not the energy, there's not the spaciousness in order to let go of those habitual patterns. So instead we find ourselves locked in these habitual patterns, and we're watching ourselves continually do them and hurting ourselves and choosing just based on the pattern because it feels safe. But it's really the meditation, that period of silence, that creates the space in which we can actually make a different choice than the path that we've already been on. It's that meditation that allows us to kind of notice, oh wow, there's this wave of light coming through. Let me see where it goes. And actually break from what has become familiar and choose that brightness. So meditate every day. Start your day with meditation. End your day with meditation. So I recommend twice a day, but at least once a day. And then throughout the day, as I said, first just start paying attention. Just become familiar with the patterns that are going on in your own mind. Don't try to, start a fist fight or get in the ring with them at this point. Just pay attention. Once you're comfortable with just watching, there's that in itself creates a little bit of wiggle room, because now you're watching. Sometimes it's horrific to watch. I'm not going to sugarcoat it because sometimes we see these thoughts that appear in our mind, that might be very judgmental towards ourselves or others, and we're surprised by them, like, oh wow, is that really what I think? And it might not actually be what you think. And this gets into a whole other topic, but I'll just kind of go over it quickly, is that we are all connected. So we feel each other's energy, we hear each other's thoughts, even though there's a cacophony, so we can't always differentiate. So sometimes a thought arises in our mind that didn't even originate with us, but because we're close to somebody, either physically or emotionally, that thought hits our mind and we notice it. So don't believe your thoughts. Don't believe every thought you think. Sometimes they're good for logic problems. Like if you're trying to solve a puzzle, then thinking logically through the steps is very, very useful. So it's not like we can just take the mind and throw it out. But instead we can start to pay attention, and then we can start to train it. Then we can start to actually choose. We can rely upon our free will to say, to set an intent and say, you know what, today I'm going to look for that wave of enlightenment that woman was talking about, and I'm going to see if I can catch it. And then we watch all these little choices that we make throughout the day, and we ask ourselves, is this the brightest option? Now, don't get obsessive and paint yourself into a corner and freeze because you can't tell. This takes practice, and over time, the more you do this, the more you check in and look for that brightness, the more you will trust yourself. So a great place, if you've never done this before, a great place to practice is when you go grocery shopping in the store. So you do your nice meditation. Maybe you've got your list so you know what you need to get. And then you go in and you say, okay, I need mustard. And so you just clear your mind and you scan the shelf of mustards. You say, which one's the brightest? And you trust that, whichever one you pick. And then you do the same thing with your breakfast cereal. It's like, okay, which one is the brightest to me? Which one has the most light? And you pick that. And then when you get home and you start to consume the food that you bought, notice how it makes you feel, and were you correct? You start eating the cereal, and maybe it brings back some childhood memories and just it's really heavy. And sometimes that actually is the brightest path because now you're processing that baggage and you're letting it go. Other times, it's just heavy. And it wasn't the brightest one. So then you make a mental note. You're like, oh, okay, didn't quite get it right on that one. But, oh, on this one, I did get it right. And that starts to build this sense of trust. And it helps us start to catch that wave of enlightenment when we start to make bigger choices that have more implications in our life. So play with that and see what happens. Do you guys have any questions about that or comments?
What do you mean by the most light?
What do I mean by the most light? That's a really good question because it's challenging to describe. I call it yesness. So it's really the Dharma, the Dharmic choice, the choice of truth. So there is this part of our being, our Buddha nature, and it recognizes that affinity. So within that very quiet part of our being, when we have a choice between us, and it's really helpful to try and narrow it down to either or, because if we try to do it and we have 10 or 20 different things to pick from, it becomes very muddy, and it's like, it becomes, well, maybe, because it all depends. A lot of times people will ask me questions, and my answer will be, well, yes and no. So if you can narrow down to an either-or choice. So that's step one, and that can be just through logic, what is actually the choice right now. Because sometimes we like to play this game where we avoid making a choice by thinking about things that we don't have to decide yet. There for New Year's in 2026. So we'll have a ridiculous choice like that, and that will burn a hole in our brain. So if it's a choice like that, just call yourself on it and say, that's not something I need to decide right now. Is this something I need to decide right now? And then pull your attention back to this present moment And ask yourself, what do I need to decide right now? And it can be just some little itty bitty choice. All of our big choices are predicated upon our little choices. So don't discount the importance of the little choice. So narrow it down. You have a choice. Go to the right, or you can go to the left. And if you can quiet your mind, there's a internal seeing. When we say seeing on this path, we don't mean visually. We mean that felt sense that just is. It's that yesness that I was talking about. So you can try to kind of key into that feeling. Sometimes it can help to remember back when you made a choice, and then every fiber of your being was really excited about that choice, and you just knew this is the right thing at the right time and the right place, and I am 100% in. So that's the feeling I'm talking about. But it can be really hard to actually tap into sometimes, especially if it seems like a trivial choice, like what breakfast cereal to have. So there's a little technique that I was shown a long time ago that helps, and it's just called tap and snap. So you clear your mind and you consider your two choices. So you're like, am I going to go right or am I going to go left? And then you tap your heart a couple times and you snap your fingers, and whatever answer pops in your head first, that's the way that your heart is pulling you. And sometimes it's very surprising, because your mind, you'll start to argue with yourself immediately, and you'll be like, well, no, I'm going to go left. but your heart said right, and so you're like, well, no, I want to go left. And so at that moment, it's a moment of trust. It's like, okay, am I going to believe what I actually felt, or am I just going to talk myself out of it? And even if you wind up talking yourself out of it, continue to pay attention, because you'll learn something. Be like, okay, I wasn't quite ready to take that step because I knew it would wind up changing me in a way that I wasn't ready to let go of. So I stuck with the familiar. Now, once in a while, we do this tap and snap technique, and we get nothing. It's just blank. What that means is you have not acquired enough information about your choices. It means that you're missing something. So your inner seeing is saying, hold on, I need to look a little deeper, because there's some missing piece. And sometimes that missing piece is it wasn't the right question. Maybe you're asking, should I turn right or left here, when the real question is, should I be in that intersection to begin with? So sometimes you got to back up and actually examine your question again. And sometimes it means that you need to actually go investigate the choices a little more in depth, because everything is in flux. So maybe everything's changing, and there's a part of you that knows choice A has shifted and changed, but you don't quite know what the outcome of that change was yet. So it might actually be better than B, or vice versa. So don't get discouraged if you do this tap and snap and there's just nothing. Now again, don't get obsessive about it and be stopping every moment of your life, because you want to create it in such a way, create this habit, this new way of interacting with the world, so it's fluid. You know, there'll be times where you're truly confused and you're like, I really can't decide what flavor of ice cream to get. I just can't. So I'm going to ask myself, which one do I want? Ah, Rocky Road. Rocky Road's the best. But that's just me. But most of the time we want to try to really trust in that feeling of yesness, that quietness that just knows which way we should go. So use the technique when you have to, but don't turn it into a crutch, in other words. So thank you for that question. It was really, really good. So I think we should meditate now. Do a nice long meditation. Sit up nice and straight. And I'm going to sign off.